everyone. I'm Dr. Karen Hardy, and welcome to Flip This Risk podcast, where we interview high achievers about their relationship with risk taking and how that impacts their leadership abilities. You can check us out at flipthisriskpodcast.com to find out more information about our episodes and also to get free downloads about our Flip This Risk podcasting books. And today, my guest today is Tom Easthope. He's with Microsoft. He's a senior program manager specializing in enterprise risk management. I'm so excited to have you here with us, Tom.
Dr. Hardy, it's my pleasure. I enjoy our conversations, each and every one of them, and I'm looking forward to this one.
That is fantastic. I'm glad you're excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you because Microsoft is an iconic company. I remember when Windows 95 first came out, and like everyone else, I was mesmerized by the product and what it could do. So the company has always been a part of innovation since I've known it. And you work at one of the most innovative companies there are.
Well, I have a great job.
Yeah.
In our team, we have enough people where we can be matrix organized. So part of our responsibility is to understand deeply what the business strategies of certain divisions are, and then the other part of our role is to get deep on certain risk topics. So in my great job, I get to pay attention and mind after our cloud and artificial intelligence, or what we call CNAI division, which is really what people most generally associate with our cloud called Azure. And the topics that I track include cybersecurity, and I'm also the person who drives, myself and a colleague drive the annual Microsoft's annual internal assessment of and application of the NIST cybersecurity framework.
Mm-hmm.
And I also track certain infrastructure topics that we have, and our hardware supply chain as well. And then in my spare time, I'm also, as kind of the senior person on our team, I drive a lot of program development work where we try to increase the capability of the foundational work that we do, whether that's improving bow ties, looking at key risk indicators, and right now, for example, we're doing a study on the network effect or the interconnectedness of certain risks.
Wow, that's key, the interconnectedness of risk, because I think everyone's starting to get on board and understand that you can't look at risk in isolation, but you have to look at it and see what those connections are across the board. And you actually mentioned three top, to me, big risks right now that you actually are involved in. The cybersecurity, that's one. The second one is infrastructure, which is two. And then the third one is supply chains. How in the world do you manage prioritization and looking at these three different important risks?
Well, I think that there's elements of commonality in some of those, in terms of what is it that executives need to know, and how do I lever the great work of the people who are on the front line, or in the first line, if you want to call it that, for us inside the risk bubble sake. And so the way that that we think about this is, you look at what are you kind of start with the business strategy, and that really is what grounds you in the prioritization. So for Microsoft, as a company that aspires to be the world's computer in terms of our Azure platform, a lot of that is trust. And people kind of go through a similar kind of calculus when they, if they got a car that they need to take into, a repair center, how do I trust this repair center? And how have they proven that to other people via certifications, or, you know, um, how do I know that they've got my best interests and those types of things? So it's, a lot of understanding what our business strategy is, and understanding fundamentally that kind of, um, necessarily centers around trust is kind of how we look at,
Mhm.
prioritization.
So let me ask you this question. I know that cybersecurity is a big deal right
Yeah.
now. How can you not have that as part of your business conversation in any organization that you're
Mm,
working in, especially with the ransom and the cyber?
yeah.
Does being in Microsoft just give you an upper hand on actually dealing with this risk, or is it pretty much a level playing field? You're no different than other company, any bigger or smaller company.
That's actually a great question. So let's break that apart a little bit. I think that in some cases, uh, it's not the same,
Mhm.
um, and that doesn't mean that it's easier.
Mm,
We're
okay.
more of a target and than most companies, and because we have such a large installed base, there is a higher responsibility, I think, that we
Mhm,
believe we have, to the industry. um, the And so, and true, there is uh, um, a a lot, and I hate to call it, but it's like an embarrassment of riches in terms
mhm,
of, being in the tech sector right now. But in that respect, you know, I think that, I'm very, very impressed with our leadership of the company
mhm,
that said, okay, let's instead of fearing this thing, let's embrace it. Let's put some of the best minds in the world on some of these problems, and let's turn this into in preventing, preventing a bad thing to happen, to seeing what we can do through embracing it, and make it a positive thing where it allows us that our commitment,
mhm.
and 3,500 people, that are cybersecurity specialists, and spending the money that we spend on the topic, um, helps differentiate us from our competitors, and does help, reinforce that sense of trust.
There was a time when, when the first, well, I think it was the cyber attack against Target years
Mhm.
ago.
Yep.
At that time was the biggest breach that we had seen, and the
Hmm.
impact was just a domino effect on the organization.
Hmm.
Not just, it may have started as a cyber risk, but it ended up impacting, reputation and
Yep.
finance and strategy as a
Hmm.
whole. So how can organizations feel confident during this time, knowing that, and how can they thrive in the
Hmm.
midst of all of these threats, which was first seen as, oh, that's different, that was an anomaly,
Right.
but now is more common? How can they continue to thrive?
Well, there's a couple of things, and I think, uh, one of the key takeaways, I think, is that, um, you know there is this notion of security hygiene,
Mhm,
and that is, uh, you know, having your systems patched, within a reasonable frequency when the patches are available, making sure that you have, um, multi-factor authentication, just some basic things there, and making sure that you have limits on who can have access for how long to what systems, and just doing some of these basic security hygiene things, and the industry will say will prevent 80% of the attacks that people have,
mhm,
that they experience. Uh, the the tech industry is always, good at, at trying to, mold some of these concepts into around an idea that they can get other people to buy into. And the current uh, uh, aggregation of some of these topics that we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, we fall into this little banner of called zero trust.
Mm-hmm.
That is, that a lot of companies, we're trying to help companies understand and migrate to that point where you have a number of things that you can do very simply to make then and make that part of the culture of your organization, so
Mm-hmm.
then your security team then can focus on the other 20%. If they spend all their time just fighting fires because you haven't done the 80%, then it becomes a problem.
Awesome. And I know that your organization, as a key leader within your organization, you are doing a great job at helping others understand the value of enterprise risk management, but also to not fear risk. How do you motivate or encourage or help your staff and team understand risk taking within an organization that it can be a good thing, but actually getting the right mindset for that, especially
Yeah.
now.
Well, part of it is, in again, I'll point back to, organizational strategy,
Mm-hmm.
and that lies in your business objectives or in your mission, and really understanding what it is that you're all about. What is it that gives your organization purpose? And and then I think each utilities, I think, maybe face a different um, operating environment than
Mm-hmm.
a very highly competitive tech company might, in terms of the risks are somewhat tied to that business strategy and the ecosystem that you participate in.
Right.
And so for us, it's not necessarily getting people to think about the goal. It's
Mm-hmm.
trying to make trying to help them systematically consider what has to go right, what can't go wrong, as a
Mm-hmm.
part of their as a part of those strategic decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like what the new COSO talks about in terms of the risk to the strategy and the risk of the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That, and so for us, we don't have to encourage anybody. We're very blessed with um, a very thoughtful senior leadership team, and I think part of that came from our legacy of going through that decade of antitrust uh, you know um, activity, where people may not have thought about these things in the past, and now the value of those types of things, I think, helps our leadership migrate through with a little bit more forethought. And so um, it's right now, it's for us, it's a maybe a different challenge than
Mm-hmm.
other companies have to go through, but it's still a lot of fun.
It's still a lot of fun. But you actually bring a perspective and a unique um, insight to
Mhm.
your organization, because besides growing up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, you are also a former entrepreneur. You've
Yep.
owned a couple of startups that you've sold.
Mhm.
And how does that experience influence how does that experience managing an organization and looking at risk as an entrepreneur? How
Hmm.
does that, help you in your current role?
Well, I have to say, I, for all of those, people who are oldest in their family, um, and I'm the oldest of six. You kind of grew up like with understanding what, responsibility and got to get it done, all that kind of stuff. But I, the, I think one of the things that, you know, going through the two startups that I had, one which was a technology startup, a
Mhm.
software as a service company that I launched in right around the year 2000. Um, uh, you get an understanding of what your business strategy is. You own the business strategy as the entrepreneur, and you really have to look at prioritizing what can mess with that strategy. And certainly the startup world is highly tied to funding and customer value and developing some momentum, and so you get a sense for what that big picture is. And also you have to be um, the CEO and the janitor at the same time,
Right.
and that kind of self-sufficiency, whether it was being the oldest of six kids or having that entrepreneurial environment, you bring to a big corporate environment. And in a time where the corporate environment was changing, it used to be that your measure of influence in the company was how many assistants you had to get your job
Hmm.
done. And as the tech world's changed, it was your ability to be agile and to be able to do things, and not have to wait for others' calendars to align with yours to get them done, made me much more efficient and effective at what I was doing. So it was a great way, it's a great launching point for what I consider to be the modern in the modern technical roles that
Hmm.
we have today.
So what I'm hearing is that understanding your relationship with risk taking personally does have an impact or influences your leadership abilities
It does.
within organizations.
It does. I, I don't really consider myself necessarily, a fitting into a certain risk profile. Am I conservative? I'm a risk taker or whatever. But I think, understanding what, and I think it's intuitive that I think, a lot of your audience and certainly risk professionals around the globe, just intuitively consider in terms of, what is the objective? What is the benefit if we're successful, and
Right.
what happens if things go well, in
Yeah.
terms of, are we prepared for that success?
Hmm.
And so I think that there's a number of things where that can play in.
So moving forward now, we're talking about a lot of organizations. Even if someone listens to this podcast 5 years from now, it will be a post-pandemic world.
Yeah.
So what is the picture? What is the foresight in terms of technology and cyber and supply chain, all these things
Mhm.
looking like in the post-pandemic world? And what can organizations do to strengthen their position in
Well,
these areas?
I think in some ways, it's one of those stories about the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Hmm.
For us, fundamentally, it comes back down to that trust concept. And really, the solution to that trust is that triad of people, process, and technology. And you need all three. And because those three are really your company culture, your organizational culture. And I think in a post-pandemic world, I think we the I at least with the learning I've taken from this is that perhaps maybe the more fragile part of that
Hmm.
triad are the people. And
Hmm.
and whether it's you have new leadership changes that you have in the public sector every once in a while, or that you've got um, a pandemic that just changes the whole type of the work paradigm as we know it. I think it focusing on the people and having some great people skills. And, you hear people talk about relationship building. It's all about relationships. I don't know that it's necessarily about the relationships per se. That's not the goal. I think that's just the method by which you fundamentally understand that organizations are made up of humans. We all have to kind of put our pants on one leg at a time,
Hmm.
and we all bring a lot of stresses and to the job every day that we hope we can put compartmentalize and get our jobs done, and really to, I think people to be a little bit more, empathetic is really, I think, the post-pandemic view.
And this probably was something that we all needed to get better at anyway.
Yeah.
And the pandemic has taught us ways and emphasized that. So in moving forward, in terms of in your industry, what technology or risks should we be on the lookout for? I mean, we've seen a lot of things happening. Is this something on the horizon that we need to start focusing on?
Yeah, it's a big question. One of the
I'm
things
sure.
that we do, is in terms of, we've mapped our whole, program and process to, a number of risk management standards, whether it's the COSO's 20 principles or the ISO
Mm-hmm.
31,000. And part of it is, living with a shout out to the ISO people, is being grounded in that external context. And so
Mm-hmm.
we look at things like the World Economic Forum, and look at, and particularly, I think, not to necessarily say that that's the one source of insight that everybody should go to, but those organizations that work maybe on a hyperscale or across the world, it would be
Mm-hmm.
a good one. But we look at some of those things, and I think that the world is just going to be increasingly volatile, and one of the things that we're trying to do at Microsoft right now is just understand what those all are, not necessarily to be the person with the crystal ball that says, oh, number 7 on the 2019 World
Mm-hmm.
Economic Forum is pandemic, and that's going to be number 3 or something like that. But it's to understand what is going on in the world. Who are, how are these things manifesting themselves, and then look at and understand how those can impact your ecosystem. And when I think about ecosystem, I'm thinking about upstream, what
Mm-hmm.
you consider to be your supply chain, who brings stuff to you. And then particularly even for, a company like Microsoft, who is part of so many other people's supply chain.
That's right.
And just understand how all of that, I think, is I think job number one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just be prepared to be super responsive, so that when something does manifest itself, then you can know a little bit about, you can get a head start on what to look at, what to look for, and be there. And so to me, if I were to give people some advice, and
Mm-hmm.
unsolicited advice, I would just be aware of your context. Understand that macro environment, understand the interconnectedness of your ecosystem, right? And understand how that ecosystem serves your mission or your business objectives, and then it's like your little cheat sheet.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're the industry in general is probably going to have to be ready to be more of a responsive organization, just because I don't know that there is a crystal ball for what the big thing is.
Exactly.
Some of the things that we get, we think about at Microsoft is, okay, we've been going through this phase where everybody's moving to the cloud, and the total addressable market the pie just keeps getting bigger. Well, if that pie stops, if that growth starts to stop, you start to find out, have you been lucky or are you good? And
Right.
so one of the things we're continually challenging ourselves and checking on our culture is to see, do we have that commitment to be good, or are we
Mm-hmm.
just riding on the lucky train right now? And so those are some things that we're trying to do to look at, one particular aspect that could impact us. But as far as, just general thoughts, I think just understanding that macro culture and how it can impact the, this very increasingly interconnected world that we live in.
Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate the fact that you've shared your insights with, giving a lot of companies, big and small, a lot of hope in this area, even though Microsoft this is your, your wheelhouse. It doesn't eliminate you from the challenges just like any other organization, and the different things, implementations you have to do, and strategies you have to think about to move forward and be successful in the future. So I definitely want to thank you for your time today to discuss Microsoft and your work.
Oh, Karen, it's been my pleasure. And I am just so happy that we have your energy out there helping the profession get better, and maintaining that, a public dialogue. I think super important, and particularly in this year where, a lot of people couldn't see or share or have, be party to these conversations. I think, what you're doing right now is a public good, and so I'm certainly happy to do my little part to contribute.
Well, I appreciate you being part of this journey, Tom. And I want to thank everyone, my audience, for listening in today. I'm Dr. Karen Hardy, and I'll see you next time.